Welcome to the HawkCast with your host, AJ Hawk.
Good friend of mine, Mark Tauscher, joins us right now. Mark is coming to us actually from Lambeau Field because he currently is a member of the media in Green Bay. He's the Wisconsin kid, everybody's favorite. You're not exactly from Madison, I guess, but you're from a suburb of there. But Tausch, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, AJ. And now, do you consider yourself? Because I have a hard time when, like, I do my show with Jason Wilde, and he said the media, and I always kind of still make fun of the media, but I can't really run from it because I am doing radio. So, do you consider yourself media now?
I mean, I guess we're all like members of the media now. I think social media kind of opened that up. But yeah, me and you, technically, I mean, you more than me for sure are a member. But I would think that every member of the media doesn't think, if they say, well, you know how the media is, even the guys that are the most entrenched media guys on the planet are like, well, they're not talking about me.
No, they definitely don't. It's a weird thing. You're right. They get really, you even say media and it's like, oh, whoa. But yeah, the media, it is. I mean, when it's said, you kind of say it and then you're like, yeah, I guess you're right. I am kind of, it's part of the media.
It's just changing. It's a different world now. How is the media now compared to when you got in the league in what, 2000?
Yeah, 2000. So you know what? It's just there's so much more, and it's constant. I think really when I got in, it was, ESPN they didn't have, once the season ended and you kind of got through the draft, there wasn't an everyday NFL Live. Pro Football Talk hadn't really, I think Pro Football Talk kind of spurred all of this coverage, and now you have so many different media outlets, and like you said, everybody has access to put out whatever information they want. So it was covered. You still had your beat guys. There was, a lot of newspaper, but it's just not as much. And now I feel like every story can really take on a life of its own because anytime it's said, it spreads and it's out there for good. And before, I think it was more you read it, and you kind of move forward.
It is out there for good. That's something I know you have kids that I've tried to get across to them, even though they're too young to really use any devices or social media, but it's true. Once something is out, it's there for life. There's no scrubbing it off the internet. And I think that goes with like these athletes. Are they telling the athletes too, these young dudes, when they come to college? Because I know these guys in high school and college are twittering and taking selfies and stuff, that it doesn't matter. You can, one tiny lapse in judgment at age 15 will be there when you're 35 or 50 years old.
It's something, I know you're a lot younger than I am, AJ, but it's definitely like raising kids. Like, it's something that I don't think you're seeing it now, but you don't understand, I don't think, how much bigger it's going to continue to be. And you're right. I kind of missed the social media. By the time my career was winding down is when, Twitter and some of the other things were really starting to get popular. But it is scary that you can make mistakes, and that stuff is, you can Google it and you can figure out a way to, and your kids can see, like, if you, like some of the stuff you did when you were 18 and even younger and older, you don't want out there. That's one of those things you're happy it's done and you kind of move. It's fun, but you move forward with it. And now all those things, if it gets caught on video or it can really kind of take on a life of its own. So I think as a parent moving forward, and I know, some of the rookies and some of the younger guys, that's something that gets taught to them early, and you hope that they learn their lesson. And I think it actually changes the culture of a locker room. I think people are now much more guarded than what they were probably for surely. I mean, I hear stories in the 70s and 80s with, guys lighting up cigarettes in the locker room, but just the social lives, everything is out there now. And everybody is, like you said, a reporter. So when you're doing something you're not, it's going to get out.
So you think the players are more guarded towards each other or towards the media? For
sure. You look at what happened with the Lakers. The guy, he ends up doing that. I think you hope that as with teammates, you trust them and know that. But for sure, I think out and about and with the media, for sure, you try not. There's some guys that want to be outspoken, but if you're a marginal player, if you're a guy that's just kind of in the middle of the roster, anytime that you're going to add a distraction, which if you say something not outlandish but anything controversial, that comes back to your teammates have to answer questions about it. And a lot of times the owners and your management will say, is he worth that? Is it worth it to have to put up with that enough? And so I think everybody's even more guarded, everybody's making good money now, and you're trying to figure out, all right, I want to still have a personality, but I'm going to make sure whatever I put out there, I'm going to be doing it on my media, not through the traditional means.
I think it's a good thing for guys that use it right, that they can kind of control the narrative more than they could before, because before you would maybe have to, I think I've made the joke in the past, like you have to call up the local print newspaper or the local news station if you want to come out with anything. I don't know if you had a statement about, say you got arrested and you wanted to talk about it, you're going to have to find the guy, call him, go in and really search him. Now you could post a little video on your Twitter or Instagram, Snapchat, whatever it may be, and get your side of the story out, at least get in front of it a bit. But I don't know, at the same time, you can't go out to dinner if you're a halfway well-known guy and do anything without it being taken on a couple still shots at the very least.
Yeah, it's definitely a different world, and it is nice. You've mentioned you can kind of control the narrative a little bit, and like for instance, our friend Johnny Kuhn, he gets, he ends up going down to New Orleans, puts out instead of having to call, Jason or so one of the beat guys to kind of put that out or pay for an ad, he can just put up on Twitter a nice thank you and reach his 40 or 50,000 followers, and it spreads and his message gets out. So there's definitely a lot of pluses to it, but I think it really has taken away a little bit of the character and some of the characters that maybe you heard stories about. You were in Green Bay a long time. Max McGee is a legendary, some of his stories, Fuzzy Thurston, all those guys, those days are over, and maybe that's good.
When I came in, the team was almost like in a transition period. So I got drafted in 2006. You were there in year 2000. And when I was getting there, it was almost like the offensive line was like became overhauled to where it was almost like the old guard was kind of growing up, retiring, or maybe going to another team for a year or two, and these young kids were coming in, and you were still part of it. You and Chad Clifton basically were the long-standing guys from the old guard, from like Marco Rivera and all those guys you played with. Like, how did that culture change in Green Bay from when you got there in 2000 all the way through 2010, 2011?
Well, I'm sure you noticed it as you got older. You come in as a young guy, and you're trying to figure things out. And my goal at first, make the team. And you said Frankie Winters and Mike Wall, Marco Rivera, Flanagan. These guys have been there a few years, and you kind of get in that offensive line room and you find your role, you find kind of what's going on, and you really build off of it, and you have a group that is really good, and we had a lot of success. And then all of a sudden, Mike Wall leaves through free agency, Marco Rivera, and I think you came the next year. 2005 was a really tough year, which allowed us to end up drafting you, early in that first round of 2006, I believe. Mm-hmm. And it was different. You now all of a sudden go from that to not only it would be different when you kind of are the oldest guy standing and you have the most starts and you have one or two new guys. Well, we had a whole new room. There was, 3 guys that got drafted, I think, in your draft class, Darren Collins and Spitty and those guys. And all of a sudden now it's like we have to overhaul this thing, and you try to figure out ways to, get everybody comfortable and get out there and play. And it was a tough transition for sure. And I think as time kind of elapsed, it got better, but there was never really that stability that we had in those mid-2000s that we had, because there's a lot of injuries that happened and things like that. But you really see the NFL in life cycles when you start looking at how you start off as a young pup and you start to grow, and then eventually and I've said this before, I know I'm not sure where you're at with your career yet, but when you finish up and you're done, it's almost like death. When you look at, the hyphen, there's a lot of high school teams will say you make the hyphen 2000 to 2011. That's kind of the hyphen for me. And it's something that your career length, there's a lot of things that happen in those 11 years.
For sure. And if you're lucky enough, like both of us have, to play 10, 11 years, you get to see those weird, like, growing pains maybe, or the social things. Was when you brought that whole new room in, like you said, that was my draft class. Was it harder getting on the same page, like on the field, football wise, or like socially and what they were into compared to what you guys were into?
It was definitely starting to get different. I think socially, linemen, we like to go out, we like to eat, and we will have some cocktails from time to time. And I think that's kind of standard protocol, when you're dealing with that. But on the field, I think you're having, there's 2 spots. There's guys jockeying for position. There was not really, Darren kind of got put in at left guard. It just was a kind of a rotational thing. So definitely on the field. I think, you could sense a generation change though, for sure, because it was, in the early 2000s, like I said, these old guys, it was, you can't ever miss this. I mean, if you miss a practice, the world is coming to an end. And I think as that happened, as I was getting older, I was having a harder time practicing consistently. That's something that I think I noticed, with that group. We could never really get the five of us practicing together consistently. And I think that hurt some of the growth that maybe we had. But we ended up coming back in 2007, and obviously we had a great season, and I think our line played pretty well. It just, there were a lot of growing pains along the way. And I think when you're dealing, the NFL is changing, and I think the players are now a lot more, I think, active and really looking at themselves from an individual business more so than from a team.
Do you think fantasy football has anything to do with guys supposedly being more out for themselves or individual goals?
I think probably the position guys. I don't think linemen, but I mean, if you think about it, these guys, Jordy and some of the guys that we know, they're out there and that's going to be the first thing that during the season, when they're out and about, that's the first thing people are going to ask them is, should I start you this week? Fantasy football is, I think, a big reason for the growth of the NFL. The way it's went from 2000 to now, the numbers that have grown, the audience has grown. Fantasy football is a huge driver. I still think most good players look at it from, if I'm performing well and the team is doing well, it'll help me individually. But I definitely think fantasy football has changed the way people look at, as a fan, the way they watch the game. And in turn, I think that also probably changes how they view their teams. They all want their teams to win, but I think fantasy football is added to, now I care about the Jacksonville Jaguars and how Allen Robinson is doing, whereas before it was strictly Packers win, let's go about our day.
That's very true. That's something that guy we both know, Kurt Fielding, mentioned to me a couple of years ago. I used to ask him, he's been there forever as a trainer, and I don't know if Kurt, it's in like a bad story, I don't know if he wants it out or not, but there you go. Kurt kind of brought it up to me. It's not anything serious, but he said he thought his theory was when kids grow up playing fantasy football, being around fantasy football and doing all this, he's like, it hasn't really hit the NFL yet. It hasn't been enough time, but eventually he thinks over the next 10, 15 years it will, to where you grow up not as much rooting for, say, the Packers and die hard, win or lose, the Packers, that's how your whole week is going to go. But it's more like, how did my team do? And you're picking all these individual guys. He feels like almost like subconsciously that breeds guys that are more out for themselves and more individualistic type people, I guess.
Well, I think too is the money's continuing to grow, and I think that's great, but it's really forcing you, and I'd be interested to hear your take. We have the big story up here in Green Bay this week has been, the Julius Peppers, Clay Matthews, should they talk to the NFL, and the contention that you can kind of see between the players and the Players Association. So I think that all kind of fits together, and it's always a battle for the NFL, and I think the Players Union gets a bad rap in this respect, that it's such a tough, when you have 1,800 guys that are going off of an individual year, and you were talking about whether or not they're in it for themselves. You can be gone, and you could be asking you. Let's say you're going to be getting a signing bonus. Well, we need you to kind of sacrifice, even though you're going to get a $15 or $20 million signing bonus. We have to sit out this year. It's really hard to do that, and I think that's where all this contention comes, because in essence, the NFL owners, they seem to always kind of have the hammer, and then they know when they're going to use it.
I think they have all the power. They have most of the smarts. They have these lawyers. They're billionaires for a reason, because they're smart business guys and they know how to play the game. But, yeah, you're right. How are you going to ask guys to sit down and to sit out a year and strike? People think that we went on strike in 2010 or after the 2010 season. No, we got locked out. It's a huge difference, but I lived through that, and I knew once it became close to training camp opening that a deal was gonna get done. That's just how it was. The NFL, we weren't gonna strike because there was already stories of players taking out these monster loans at a time when you don't get a paycheck. Like, you don't get paid in April, May, and June in the NFL. You get paid during the regular season. So I think unless you are willing to sit out and for everyone to sit down, and it's true though, you have such a tiny window to make that money. How are you going to ask a guy, or how can you expect a guy to sit down when he knows he's on a contract year? So I know living through it, I was just hoping that the new CBA got done, and if they would have came to me and asked if I was willing to strike, I don't know, man. It would have been really tough for me to actually follow through with that and sit out games.
And you know what? That's I think always the interesting part, because I saw our friend Aaron yesterday kind of mentioning that on Jim Rome. He was talking about how in 2011 the CBA that we got beat up a little bit. And it just really comes back to, I think, that's really the crux of the issue, is that you have 32 billionaires and you have 1,800 guys that really want to get paid every year. And it's a really tough recipe to try to win when that's the case.
And the owners are fully aware of the fact that the guys' careers are so short. They know that they have the upper hand going in. And it would be devastating for them to lose even half of an NFL season, but compared to what it would happen for players, say, when you only have this 1 or 2 year window, say, to hit free agency, that's life altering for players.
I agree.
Would you have sat out? Would you have gone on strike?
It's tough to. I think if I'm in my year 4 or 5, I think that makes it's going to be really tough. But at the end, I think when you're, if you're making $1.5 million, or if it's something, it's a really hard question to answer until you're in the position. And you can say yes because you have all these people saying, that's what you guys need to do. And then it's another thing, like with Clay and with Julius, they're saying, well, you shouldn't talk to the NFL because you need to stand up. Well, yeah, it's easy for everyone else to say that. It's another thing if you have a $10 million contract and you're going to be missing out 4 games because you're doing it. So until you're in that position, and I never had to be. We had, I guess, some sense of labor peace throughout my 11 years. It is really tough, and it's hard to ask, and that's, like you said, the owners know that, and I think that's typically why things go the way that they do.
Do you think Roger Goodell has too much power right now?
Sure. Yeah, I do. I don't think he should ever be the judge, jury, executioner. I don't think that's good for anyone, to be honest with you. And I think if you look at the stuff that has come up, the Tom Brady and all of that stuff, I think is just I guess you could say empowered, but it really has made their power even stronger. And I don't think there's ever been a time, and I didn't go through the strike in '87. I've seen it's been pretty peaceful with Paul Tagliabue. I don't know if it's ever been more of a untrusting environment between two parties that are supposed to be working together. And if they did work together, I think it'd actually even be that much better. But right now, I think it is pretty poisonous.
Is that because of DeMaurice Smith or what? I know Gene Upshaw was hugely respected until and he was the old head of the union. Then he died, and DeMaurice got voted in. So is it because DeMaurice and Roger Goodell don't get along?
That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that. I think it's just I think there's obviously a change, and DeMaurice came in, and I really like D. Smith. I think he's a guy that I think if everything was equal, I think you could figure things out. But for whatever reason, the trust isn't there, and until you can believe and start getting some things put together that will make sense on both sides, it's always going to be a little contentious. And I think this point is really illustrated how important the collective bargaining agreement is. And I think now that it's not just New England fans that are getting affected, there's other people getting affected. It'll be interesting to see if the PR hit actually comes, how that is handled. But I think that I think both guys are very smart, and I think they're trying to do their best. It's just like I said, man, when there's no trust in a relationship, it makes it pretty tough.
Do you think so I don't know when we're going to post this. I know the league gave the August 25th deadline for Julius and Clay and Mike Neal, I guess, and James Harrison to give an in-person interview, whatever it may be. Do you think they're going to go in and speak to him?
I do. I think that they will, and I think if you look at Peyton Manning went in, spoke, and is cleared. Yeah. So to me, it's like I'd like to just see what's the evidence, and then if there's more to it, then you have to go through it. But to me, I think it's just a force you're kind of using because you won those cases. You have to keep precedent so that you can do it, and it is a slippery slope. Like James Harrison said, guys are. I mean, now you can just go off of any accusation. Like the Bears, Bears obviously Packer fans. A Bear fan could say, "I saw so and so using such and such," and oh, let's investigate him. So it is really slippery, and I hope for everybody's sake that they can get it worked out and everybody can play.
It'll be cool to see how it plays out, I guess, because you're right. It's such a slippery slope there. And with all the gamesmanship going on in the NFL and all the money on betting and gambling, can you imagine all the people that might come out of the woodwork to try to accuse people of things?
It's something that I don't think anybody wants to go to. I guess, what do you think, AJ? What's your thoughts on kind of we both know Eric Winston pretty well. He was with you, I think, last year, right? And yep. I think Eric's done a good job. It's just, how do you think you can kind of get it so that the relationship can be beneficial on both sides?
I don't know, man. I used to ask Eric about this all the time. I sat next to him in our team meetings in Cincinnati. I think Eric does a great job as the head player rep for the PA. But man, it's gone so far. I don't know how you can get it back as of now. I mean, the Tom Brady situation. Just to think, like when Tom took the league on and he won, you're like, oh my God, has anybody ever gone against the league and actually won? Oh, Tom Brady did, and they still came back and got him 6 months later, whatever it is, and sat him down for 4 games. So I think when the league does stuff like that, and then this thing, it just puts the icing on the cake, man. When they give him like a deadline to say they have to come in and speak to us, if Peyton's already cleared, I understand Peyton spoke to him, but Peyton's completely cleared, and it all started with Peyton. Mm-hmm. So how are you going to say that these guys, there might be something against them? I don't know, man. Like that, it's such a weird deal. I think you can't get it back. It's going to be a long time. Either there's going to have to be a different commissioner. There's going to have to be they're going to have to go out in the woods and take ayahuasca and have a seance together and look each other in the eyes and figure things out and have like a whole shift in their brains. But I don't see it changing anytime soon.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tricky. So, I was going to ask you one more thing. So how is the kind of the transition for you, Ben? I know you're, I don't know if you're going to play or not, but has it been, what's kind of been your mindset? Because I always love talking about that, and I know I wanted to kind of pick your brain before I kind of went on about it.
It's weird. It really is weird for me. Right now it's up my first time in for however many years not being in a training camp. And the weirdest thing for me is that I don't really feel like I'm missing out on anything. Like I didn't feel like my body's itching to get somewhere. I almost had a sense of that when Cincy let me go at the end of April. So I don't know, man. I work out every day, and if a great situation came up, I would definitely look at it to continue to go play. But I don't feel, I guess, like people told me I should feel, but at the same time, I've also been preparing my whole life. I knew at an instant anything could happen and I'd be done playing. So it's weird, man. I'm not sad. I'm not depressed. Nothing like that. But it's also because I'm excited and I have something I really enjoy. Like you're into the media and broadcasting world. I'm diving headfirst into that with a bunch of different things. So it also I have something to work towards that I'm passionate about.
Yeah, it's definitely weird. And I think until it's real final, I mean, I think I don't know where exactly you're at, but the finality of it, and when you're moving forward, and I tell people all the time, it's like, all right, you kind of have a sense of relief at first. You get done, and then you're like, oh, I can do whatever I want. And after a couple weeks, you play golf, and you take your kids to the pool, and after 2 weeks, you're kind of like, oh, nobody, I don't have to answer anybody. And then after about 2 weeks, you're like, shoot, man, I don't have to answer anybody. I have no, because I had went, since about 15 or 16 years old, you go and you have structure and you have this, I need to be here. And you do that for 20 years. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, what's next? And that was kind of the thing that when it hit me is like, man, I got to start getting some stuff together, because you can really go. I can totally understand how guys go down kind of that weird path, is because you have all this stuff, you have all these things going on, not even to deal with like identity and everything else. There's a lot of stuff there that is all of a sudden gone, and there's a lot of soul searching. And at least for me, that's some stuff that I've had to do.
What are some things that you did to help you get through that?
Well, it's talking to people, and really, I think we, especially kind of the generation that I grew up in, you didn't really talk a lot about emotions, and you didn't really get into a ton of that stuff. And it helped me to talk to, family and friends, and just try to be as open and honest. But even then, I think you're still kind of, at least in mine, you fight it because it's so caught up because people still, especially people identify you with the Packers and they will ask questions, and that's kind of identity-wise still a big part of my life. And so you try to figure things out, but it's definitely a struggle. And like I said, man, I totally get. I think when I was playing, I was like, man, it'll be nice when you're done. You can go do whatever you want, and I can't believe these guys are struggling. You hear all those stories, and now I totally get it.
Yeah, that was something I paid attention to, especially my last 3 or 4 years in the league. Just talking to people, no matter what, I heard people tell me, no matter what level you finish playing football, that may be your senior year in high school. They're like, there's going to be a weird transition period where it feels weird that you're not playing, you're not doing this thing that you love. So yeah, it's something that you have to think about for sure, I guess. But man, I think the guys I've seen that have really struggled hard, and I'm not claiming to be any Superman, like I'm just completely fine with everything. But the guys that really struggle are the guys that thought in their mind somehow they just put it out of their brain that they ever wouldn't play football. They just felt like, what do you mean I'm going to play till I'm 100? I used to ask people, what do you think you're going to do when you're done? Like, I don't have to think about that, man. I'm good. I was like, all right, well, you might want to. And then a couple of those guys I've asked that question to were cut like 3 weeks later. That's how brutal it is. So, like, I think always planning and having something that you care about, and it has to be something on the other side other than, like, your kids and your wife. That's a given. You're going to love them and take care of them and raise them. But you have to have something that your brain, like, is passionate towards and you're going to work at, I think.
Yeah. How tough was it for you when Green Bay released you?
It was weird. When I got the call to make it, like, official, I had like a 10 minutes with my wife at this restaurant. We were eating breakfast with our kids. It was kind of weird for sure when I was like, oh, I guess I'm not going back. I expected to be gone, and I kind of felt it in the air where I wasn't going to be there anymore. And so I knew, and I was like prepared myself for sure that it wasn't coming back. I even told my family and my parents and everybody. I was like, hey, there's no way they're going to keep me. But yeah, when I got that call, I guess, and they officially let me know, it was really weird. It really was. But then I was lucky though, because shortly after I had Cincinnati call me. That was like my boyhood team when I grew up watching Cincy. So that was something to like turn to right away. But yeah, it's still kind of not weird, but it's still, I still have so many friends in Green Bay, and we get to see you down at Josh Sitton's wedding. It's fun to get everybody back together again. But yeah, Green Bay is such a special place, man. I'm not even from Wisconsin like you, so I can't imagine what it's like.
Yeah, it's definitely. I always am interested to hear kind of that initial, because it really hit. I mean, it hits you like a ton of bricks. Even though, I mean, I knew I was going to be released, and it's still when you hear those words like, "Yeah, we're going to let you go." It's like, oh, it's a weird feeling. So I was curious what happened with you.
Yeah, I got a call at breakfast with my wife. It was my agent actually, and he's like, hey, yeah, so they're not going to, they're going to let you go. And it was like that same thing. We were like, all right. Mm-hmm. Like I just looked at Laura, and she's like, what, who is it? I was like, I'll tell you, hold on. Like, so yeah, when I had to actually say it and like when you have to like verbalize it, I think that's obviously harder too. It's good for you, but it's definitely hard at that exact moment, no doubt.
No question.
That's how does it feel then covering the Packers now? I mean, just a couple years removed.
It's weird in the sense like the first game I did, Cliffy's one of my best buddies. He was kind of coming back from an injury. I think you guys were playing the Giants. You got beat up at Lambeau. And Chad was just coming back, and you kind of sensed that he was struggling a little bit. And they were asking questions like, it's almost like PTI type stuff. Like, tell me about it. And I'm like, I'm not going to comment on it. It was hard to be, because the guys that you have relationships with, and now as time has elapsed, and as in Green Bay, you don't know as many guys. Every year there's a few less guys. John left, and so it gets easier. But it really is tricky when you're covering or you have to say some critical things about a player that you're a friend or a good friend with. It was a little bit tricky, but as time goes on, like I said, man, you get more comfortable with it the more you do it, I guess.
Are you ever in like open locker room sessions?
No.
So would you feel comfortable going around like after a game or practice and going up to just the guys' lockers and asking them questions?
I would. I don't think that's really what I want to do. The beat guys, they have it kind of down. I don't ever foresee myself being a beat guy. I kind of like commenting on what other people are writing and then forming my own opinions from when I played. That's kind of the way I look at it. I don't think I'll ever get to the point where I'm down there asking, AJ Hawk how practice went today. I don't see that one happening.
Would you, just to make yourself so you don't feel like you're intimidating to the players, would you, for old time's sakes, wear a towel into the locker room for open session just like them when coming out of the shower?
I definitely would not for numerous reasons. So I tried not to do that when I played, so I wouldn't do that as I was doing a pseudo. But it would be kind of weird if you've kind of forced I'm not going to go down that road, man.
What? Go down that road.
I was going to say it would be a little bit weird if you forced reporters to do the same thing, shower up and come in. But it's not a road, I don't think. I don't think anybody wants to go down that road.
I was thinking that exact same thing, Tausch.
We got a couple of great minds. Even though your hair is shorter, we were hair brothers for a long stretch. And I think when I saw you down there, you looked so much more free without the long hair. You're kind of making me feel like maybe that's a road I should go down.
Free as in what? Because my Frisbee game was on point on the beach or what?
I don't think you have to do the maintenance. It looks like you basically just shower and brush it back, right?
I got to put some product in because my hair's all fluffy and terrible, but yeah.
Yeah, you put the product in. So I felt like you I hadn't seen you since you kind of chopped it off. It's been a while, and you definitely look like you're more relaxed and just kind of in control with this look rather than, the old, I don't know what you called that look that when you had it, but whatever it was, you look like you're a little happier now.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad. I feel very happy. So, I hope that came across. I was happy to see you. We were down at our buddy Josh Sitton, his wedding in Pensacola, and for anyone that was down there, it was a crowded beach. There's got to be some footage. Tausch and I, we had a solid 3-hour Frisbee sesh diving into the ocean, and it was – I tried to come home and come back to the hotel and doze. I was dozing off, man, before we went to that wedding because I worked hard out there.
You were grinding. Yeah, you're a competitor, man. You
grinding.
You definitely didn't want to get – I felt bad because the wind started shifting, and we almost clipped off a couple of people that were just minding their own business out on the beach. But, yeah, Pensacola, she's a warm one. You want to stay in the water if you can.
Yes, she is. She is. Shifting gears quickly, Tausch, to your playing days when you played tackle. So you just came in, 7th-round pick, the people's champ, basically. I mean, you and Brett Favre are probably the two loudest cheers when it comes to intros at Lambeau Field, I feel like. I'm sure Aaron's up there now, but the people love you. Why do you think people relate to you or love you so much?
Well, I think I grew up, obviously, in the state, and I played at Wisconsin, so those two things help a lot. And, I look at it kind of as a 7th-round pick, I don't think there was a lot of expectation, and I just kind of worked for what came. I worked for an opportunity, and I was able to, fortunately take advantage of it. So I think, the people, most of it is that, and I think it's just the fact that, you try to work hard and do things, you try to perform, but it really comes down to, I think I'm from the state of Wisconsin, and I was fortunate to play at Wisconsin. I don't think there's anything much more to it than that, and then, I feel like I'm probably pretty relatable. So, people can kind of I looked at as a kid, you were a Bengal fan. I was obviously a huge Packer fan, and I can, study I know the history of the team pretty well. And I think, as a kid that grows up, if you have any inkling to play football, obviously this is the cathedral right over here that you want to play at.
Do you remember the first sack you gave up in an NFL game?
Yes.
Who was it?
Yeah, it was to Mike Mamula. I don't know if you remember that name.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Big combine. And matter of fact, the thing is, so my first game I played, Earl Dotson hurt his back in Buffalo. So it was actually really nice. I didn't know I was going to play a ton, and so you couldn't really work yourself up because your first game is a big deal. So my first start was against Philadelphia here in 2000, and I didn't play my best. I didn't handle the situation as well as I hoped. And Mike Mamula was lined up, and I gave up a sack that day, and it still kind of eats at me, so I appreciate you bringing that up. But it definitely was one of those where I look back at it and I was like, man, you just have to kind of take everything else out of the equation, figure out a way to kind of get yourself you want to stay as even keeled as you possibly could. That was a lesson I kind of learned from that game because I was way too high and I didn't play as well as I would like to because I let kind of the emotions get me out of it. It was my first game. I had family and friends come in, and it was a big deal. I made it a much bigger deal than I needed to, and so it was a good lesson learned, but it was my first sack that I gave up in an NFL game.
How did Brett handle it? Did Brett Favre get upset with you?
I don't think so. He was good about, first of all, he was really good at getting rid of the ball. And secondly, I think he probably understood that I was probably a little jittery and that I was going to have some growing pains. But no, and I'll say this about both him and Aaron. I think, a lot of times quarterbacks will blame their offensive line. You never really hear that from either of those two. They always, as great leaders, they always kind of took it upon themselves to, take the brunt of most criticism that comes down the pike. But it's never a good look for a quarterback. The lineman feels bad enough when you give up a sack. You don't need to make him feel even worse by doing that. And I think both those guys probably understood that.
To sit there and yell directly at your tackle when it's the only time that they're going to probably zero in on you in a game is when you do get beat for a sack.
It's definitely the worst. If you're hearing a lot of number 65, typically it's false start, holding penalty, or you gave up a sack. You're not hearing, oh, that was a nice block by 6. It's just that's not how offensive linemen. That's not kind of how that goes. So you don't want to hear your number or name until the Monday or Tuesday after.
Okay, so like going into a week, let's say it's Monday and you have a game coming up Sunday. How do you prepare for a game? Do you zero in on like the one or two guys that may be rushing your edge or what?
So what I always tried to do is figure out, all right, what do we want to do on first, second down? What do we want to do on third down? And then figure out what those formations were. And then you study, well, who's going to be in? You typically know, when you're playing right tackle, especially early in my career, there were bigger – the game, you just ran the football more then than teams do now. So you try to study all of that. What are they going to do I always looked at it more of I would cut the field in half. I would find a middle linebacker, and then I would go over to my right and try to study, if this guy cheats in, if there's a guy coming off if he cheats up 2 yards, there's more than likely a chance he's going to rock across my face. Or if this defensive tackle, 3 technique, is lined up, a little bit deeper, they're probably going to try to run an ET game. If he's lined up a little tighter to me, he's probably trying to pick me. That was always kind of the first things that I tried to pick at. I never really got caught up in trying to figure out every move that a guy was going to make. I always thought if I can just get myself in a position where, I felt like I could block him, get back, get my 2 steps, my 2 kick sets in, and then kind of react. Because, our old O-line coach, who I don't think you had the pleasure to meet, was Larry Bechtel. And he would tell me that, these guys would psych themselves up when they're blocking Bruce Smith when he was with the Dolphins. If they had to block Bruce Smith, they would get so, just completely psych themselves out. And I kind of agree with him because when you're playing a big-name guy, if you're blocking Julius Peppers or if you're blocking Michael Strahan, you can almost starting to buy into some of the things you see him do on film. You want to have an idea what they think, but they're going to rush differently against me than they're going to rush against a Chad. So I never got caught up a ton in that. It was more, gosh, I want to understand what we're going to do and then figure out what is their answer to those personnel groupings and formations. And if you had a general idea of that, it tipped you off on what they could do. And then the rest of it just came down to trusting your fundamentals and trying to put yourself – I always just try to say, put yourself in a position where you can win. Try to get yourself as comfortable because – as a defensive lineman, you want to get the offensive lineman as uncomfortable as possible. You don't want them to be able to set their feet. You want them crossing over and doing those things. So I always just looked at it, try to find a way to get as comfortable as you could, getting back so that you can react and do what you're asking to get done.
Now, what's one of the most tangible assets you have that kept you in the league so long as a starter and such a great tackle? Was it your feet? Was it your hands? What was it?
It definitely wasn't my hands. I think I always got made fun of because I bear hugged and I would be out here. But I think my feet were a lot better. People always looked at me. They underestimated me, and I was fine with that. But my feet, and then I think my balance was good. I could get thrown off, and when I played Reggie White when he was in Carolina, I was worried about his club move. He was 38 at the time, so I felt a little bit better than if I was going against him when he was 28. But so balance and footwork, I think, were kind of the things that I would always say, if I could just get my feet in front of him and just grab him, hold on, and then see, I felt like I would win more often than not. And that was kind of the strengths that I felt like I possessed. And, unfortunately, as you get older, your feet don't move quite as quick. And some of those things, so your weaknesses can get exposed a little bit more. That's when I tried to work getting hands inside and some of those things. But it definitely, as you age, it makes it tougher. But, when I was playing probably my best, I would say my feet and balance.
Why'd you say people underestimated you?
Well, when I came into the league, let's be honest, pretty much my whole career, my physique I'm not a 6'7", long-armed, long-lever guy. I was always, I guess you could say, pudgier. That's the polite way of putting it. But people looked at me, and I think they always kind of thought of, a try-hard guy, probably limited athletically. And I never felt in my mind that I was limited athletically. I never really fought it because it actually played to my advantage. I felt like that if you want to underestimate me, great. I'm not going to sit here. It's like, you go around and speak to kids and to people, and they always ask about trash talkers. Everybody wants to hear about great trash talkers, John Randall and Sapp. And it's like, did you ever get in trash talk? I said, why on earth would I trash talk somebody that's more athletic? I always was telling him, man, I thought you missed the Pro Bowl. You should have gotten a couple Pro Bowls. It's ridiculous you haven't gotten in yet. I never got caught up in why would I jabber with somebody? I always tried to build them up and make sure that they knew that I thought they should have been Pro Bowl players.
That's a thing.
What's that?
No, what'd you say?
No, I was just going to ask you, did you you always were, did you ever get into any of the trash talking? I always appreciated your approach. You knew what you were going to be doing, and you were dialed in to get it done.
Mainly I wouldn't talk back to guys because I sucked at it. I just had nothing creative to say. I would just go.
What was the worst thing? I have my worst. So I had some guys said something to me, get your hands out of my face. And I said, get your face out of my hands. And that's when I thought, man, I got to shut this down. That is not going to work on my end. So that was another reason I wasn't a big trash talk guy. But did you have any really not smart things that you said?
No, other than I would either, if I ever said anything, it was either oh, well, you suck. It was like Billy Madison in a movie, or I would just a few times cross the line and just say horrendous thing and just hope their whole family died in a fiery crash or something. So then I just knew, shut it down. Don't say anything.
Yeah, if you're not good at it, man, don't. If it's not one of your strengths, probably just move along.
Yeah, my whole thing was I would just laugh. For some reason, it was like a natural reaction to laugh at guys. When they would get in my face and yell, I would just laugh for some reason. Just because I had nothing to say. I couldn't come back with anything, so it was just funny to me.
That probably irritated people more than if you said anything.
Most likely, but I was like you, man. I would try to butter them up, all the interior linemen, especially you're going against. I wanted them to, every once in a while, there'd be times when I'd be in a vulnerable situation where someone falls behind you or something, and they're on top blocking you, and they're like, oh, and they'll hold you up a little bit maybe, and not try to end your career right there. So I would definitely butter them up and tell them how good they were and how hard. I'm like, man, damn, you got a hard head, man. You're serious. And so I'd keep headbutting him all day, and he would try, maybe 5% I would try to take off of him.
I never understand why people did do it that way, because you're 100% right. I guarantee you, had you been a jerk and done something, they would have tried to decleat you, and Lord knows what could have happened. But those guys, man, people buy it. I think it's a smart way of doing it, and I think we both picked up on that.
Yeah, you have to. You might as well. Why give this dude any more ammo when he doesn't, I'm already physically outmatched for sure. I felt like that was always the case when these big giants would come just engulf me with your guys' long arms.
Yeah, it never made any sense to me, and I think I think with the mics being on everybody now, if you heard, you would hear it if there was a lot of it, especially I think maybe outside the DBs and wideouts maybe still do. But I think interior, I think it's a lot more of this than maybe it used to be.
It is, especially in the NFL, because you cross over with so many guys you may have played with in college. You might have played with them on different teams in the NFL, or you've watched them play forever. I did that before. But yeah, man, I'm a big fan, buddy. If a dude's been in the league for a long time, we just killed each other, but I would tell him how I grew up watching him.
Yeah, it's good.
That's good, man. All right, I'm gonna slowly wrap this thing up. But so you played for two head coaches, though. That's one thing I wanted to ask about: Mike Sherman and Mike McCarthy, correct?
Yes. Yep.
How was like the culture between those two guys? That's something I always wonder about. Like, what was the difference? Different. Okay. Totally. Like, how was Mike Sherman then? How was the culture then?
So Mike Sherman was, we met to met. There's a lot of meetings, very structured. And, one of the things that I think Mike McCarthy has done is Mike Sherman. I loved Mike Sherman as a coach. You knew what you were getting. You knew exactly the plan. And he was a very good coach. Mike McCarthy, I think he looked at it more of a matchup. He wanted to find matchups, and if they bring 7 or 8 guys down, if you had 9 guys down, when we were with Mike Sherman, we're going to run power, and nobody's going to stop. If we execute it, we're gonna be successful. Well, sometimes you bring 9 or 10 guys down, you got to throw it. And Mike McCarthy would look at it from, all right, you're going to bring 9 guys. And that means, we have Greg Jennings one-on-one. We like that matchup. And so it just was a whole different culture. There was a lot more longer days. I think there was, and this was just the culture of the NFL at the time. I think no coach ever wanted to get outworked. I don't think we're going to study every last second of film. And I think with Sherm, he was a grinder to the T, and I think he embraced it, and that was what made him successful. Where I think Mike McCarthy, he really looks at it like, man, we have to find out what is our strength. And again, he always would look at his wide receivers and he'd say, we got to get these guys in space and make plays. And so both guys tried to figure out what the strength of their team was and do it. It just was different ways to get there.
That's interesting. I came shortly in Coach McCarthy's first year, so I definitely played with a lot of guys that knew Sherman and coaches, and they all had huge respect for him, but they definitely would tell me, like, this is way different.
Definitely different. Yeah, I think I don't think you could have – and I think that was a big part of the culture change too. You were talking about with the linemen kind of switching out. It was just we had a really bad year, and Mike Sherman got released from his job. The change of player safety and everything else made a big impact too, because you can't hit as much. You have to find smarter ways of trying to practice and get the job done that you're looking for. So it was definitely a huge change, and I'm sure if you talk to the guys that were with Mike Holmgren to Mike Sherman, they'd have probably – I don't know if you get this a lot, but it's like I just have noticed. I've interviewed a few guys lately during training camp, and there's like 15 practices, and I'm the get off my lawn guy. It's like, man, if I would have had this, we could have played another 10 years, and in 10 years it's going to be the exact same conversation with the guy saying, "Oh, you guys got it so easy." So I'm happy that it works out that way. But the culture has definitely changed. It
has, yeah. Hopefully it changes for the better in the health for long term. I think for players, because we know that whole story and that narrative going around with head injuries, concussions, everything. So hopefully this helps with that over the new CBA and stuff. I played 5 years in the old CBA, and 5 with the new. So I feel like I got a good version of both sides of it when you still had 2-a-days and there was no rules and you could practice as long as you want and hit. And then I had 5 of the new one. So whatever.
Are you worried at all about that? Are you worried about the health of your health?
Of my only my brain.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not worried because you never know. That could hit you at any time, I guess, whenever it decides to sprout up. But I didn't have any documented concussions playing ever. But no, I mean, other than that, I mean, I can get fake knees and hips, shoulders, whatever. That's fine with me. But as long as my brain stays all right, I'm cool.
Did you feel like did you know, like, with the lawsuit and everything, it was like, because I feel the same way. I went into the NFL thinking, all right, I'm probably going to I'm going to have knee problems now, even though at the time I felt great, shoulder, that stuff. But I never once thought about, the fact that there could, and maybe I just was being naive, but I never thought about brain injuries and all of the things that you've seen kind of unfold. Did you ever even think about that?
No, I never really thought about it other than to like make jokes about it about myself. That's like a common thing about talking about how you forget stuff as a player and you feel like, well, I'm one of those guys, so I can make fun of that. So I never thought of it past that. And then all of a sudden the CTE, and you're like, well, yeah, I guess I knew when I was younger that running my head into monsters like you every single day probably is not great for my head.
Yeah, now that I think about it, like my brothers would say, man, well, what? You must just not have been thinking. Like, of course that's going to cause damage. And I was like, I guess I always had the impression that helmet was, that was going to take care of everything, right? You saw boxing and the damages that it's caused, but I just never thought that there were these issues that have come up, and obviously with the settlement and things, it's something that I guess I was maybe naive on.
Yeah, it's a real thing, I guess, for sure. It's also can go the other way where people can flip it and try to use it to their advantage, and when they don't really have head injuries when they're younger. So I don't know. It was like a thing growing up and even early on where if a guy wanted a day off, he could just say he got dinged up and got a concussion because that dude wouldn't have to go to the training room. Normally during camp, they'd have to go sit there and get treatment for 10 hours. A concussion, they'd be like, hey, just go to your room and just lay down.
God, I think it's crazy that you've never had a concussion.
No, knock on wood, Tausch, for me.
Oh,
but look at this. Look at this nose. Scarred nose with a big bump and then a hard cranium.
Well, hey, kudos to you, man. I thought it would be almost impossible to play as long as you've played. And, so I guess, would you have your kids play? I'm sure you get this question a lot, right? Would you have your kids play in the NFL with even knowing now what kind of the dangers are?
Yeah, I have two young boys, and if they want to play football, I said I'll be fully supportive and let them play. I don't know, but I'll be hyper aware of everything at their practices, at their games, if they're hitting in practice, which they don't need to do when they're young. You don't need to sit there and wear full pads in 6th, 7th grade, man. Get out of here. But I'll be aware. I'll know when they're dinged up. That's something you have it. I promise you. I know you have it where you can see if a dude got dinged, if he's got some issues. Like, oh, choop, I'll be right there. Get out of here, bud. And I'm gonna ice his head and sit him down for a couple weeks.
Yeah, it's definitely there's the age group, and if you start there's a lot of groups that are starting him in 4th and 5th grade, and I didn't start till I was 7th and 8th grade. And the argument is, well, they're smaller. But I don't. There's some question marks. I think I'm with you, man. If you're going to do it, be hyper aware. But it is a great game, and I think we both obviously loved football, or we wouldn't have done what we did.
Exactly. Yeah, we just got to be aware and got to pay attention to your kids, and don't let some idiot douchebag coach that's coaching his 5th grade team have him do Oklahoma drills every day to try to toughen them up. No, that's not happening. Yeah,
I know. So I know we're wrapping up, but I've been found here lately. I've had Aaron on our show, Wildy and Tausch. I've had City, and both guys like lightning rounds at the end of their stuff. And there's nothing worse than putting a host on the spot, but I think we should try to do a lightning round. I need to work on my lightning round, so if you had one, I'd love to do it.
If I had a I'm going to come up with my lightning round for you.
Yeah.
Of course.
I mean, I because it's been like the second guy, like – because lightning rounds typically bring, whenever you do an interview, you have like your serious part. Yeah. You try to have your fun part. And it's like, what would be fun to finish is you guys should start focusing on lightning rounds. And I was like, I agree. And Wildy is not very good at lightning round stuff. He's always wanting to get sentimental and like get into, the serious stuff. And I was trying to I always try to go TV because everybody has like different TV stuff that you can everybody can kind of relate to. And we have fallen flat both times we've done it. So I'm going to pick your brain to try to see if you can help us out.
Do you want to – you're going to ask me the questions or I'll ask you?
No, I'm not prepared.
I'm not either. I'm not prepared, but I can come up with it.
We weren't prepared either, and that, I guess, is the first lesson I learned. Make sure you're prepared for a lightning round.
See, I've thought about this before. Like, I've thought about coming, but you just got – it's like a fine line. If you can have you just have to be good at it, I guess, and ask good questions because it could turn real cheesy and corny if you – don't prepare.
What I never want to do when you ask a question is get a one-word answer. Yeah. And I feel like lightning rounds sometimes can kind of be one. You can kind of say, what's your favorite TV show? Seinfeld. Ooh. That's not good radio typically. So that's why I've steered clear of it. But we need to work at it, and that's...
Here, I got you. I got you a quick lightning round for you, actually. I got it. I've already been formulating some of this.
Okay, go.
You ready? All right, yep. Tausch. Have you ever heard anyone call you Mike Trouser?
Yes.
Who was that?
Money Mike Montgomery. And I'll tell you this, I blocked him. It's not one thing if he's like a guy that, is a DB that don't speak to as much as everybody else. Mike is a guy I blocked, like scout team. I would go against him constantly, and we had a good relationship. And all of a sudden he comes up, and I'm sure, like Nate Weir and all the trainers, they get the biggest kick out of this story. But we're sitting there, and he's like asking somebody, like, who's Trouse? Mike Trouser. Man, he's all right. And Nate comes up to me and goes, Money Mike has no idea what your name is. And this is 4 years probably of blocking against him. I was like, that's not a good sign for me that he still doesn't know my – and it's not even that he butchered my last name. I get that. To not even know my first – and the whole thing was a little bit weird. So, yes, to answer your question, Mike Trouser, yes.
I love it. I don't know why I love that.
He's an actor now. And I saw him out at a Super Bowl, and he said that he was up for a big role. I don't know if he got it, but he is acting like a live actor out in Hollywood.
Good for him, man. Maybe maybe his character will be called Mike Trouser if he gets in a big movie one day.
God, that'd be great if he did.
Throw you a shout out. Okay, what's your favorite movie, Tausch?
Shawshank Redemption.
Why?
I thought the way it was set up, and the first time I saw it, obviously I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know how he was going to escape. I thought it was just geniusly written, that it was the psychology of it, the way it kind of made you think about, the guy that ended up hanging himself. I can't remember his name now, but the whole movie, it kind of just gives you the idea of hope, and it was not only funny and a lot of good poignant parts, but it also taught me a lot as the movie was going, and typically that doesn't happen. And then Wedding Crashers is a close second. A little bit different reasons why I like both movies, but I laughed more at Wedding Crashers than I did at Shawshank.
It's good to know. Do you believe in aliens?
I don't.
Do you believe there's life out there other than us?
Yes.
Then what are they?
Well, I think that there might be just normal people living on Mars. I don't think they have to be Martians. I think they could be there could be somebody doing a podcast right now on Jupiter. I don't know that. In
a parallel universe, there could be another AJ Hawk talking to another Mike Trouser.
Amen. Yeah, it very well could be. Wouldn't be this entertaining, but
no. Did you watch Stranger Things on Netflix?
I didn't.
Speaking of parallel universe, that'd be something I think you would like.
What is it called?
Stranger Things. It just came out a little while back and it took off. It's legit.
Okay, I'll check that out.
Okay, what's your favorite TV show then?
Right now, or just of all time?
Okay, yeah, let's say right now, actually.
Right now, I would say, what I like, and my son loves it, is the show Pickers. What is it called? Antique Archaeology. American Pickers, it's called.
Yeah.
And he likes the idea of, going in and picking stuff out of a barn and then selling it. And so much so that he started doing he opened up his own barber shop using our window in the front of our house. He's got an open and close sign up there. And so it kind of taught him a little bit about entrepreneurship. And that and Shark Tank are kind of the shows we as a family like watching. And he's bought in. And Seinfeld for me, for the old time, is a great show by far.
Will Kramer ever make a comeback after his meltdown at the comedy club?
No, I think he's done.
Will you ever cut your long hair or your facial hair?
Yes, I definitely will.
Does your wife want you to cut it?
No, that's one of the reasons I've kept it, as a matter of fact. I think the facial hair she could probably do without. I think until I shed some weight, I think I need to keep that on to kind of beard it up. But definitely, I'm getting sick of the long hair. I'm kind of ready for a change.
Ooh. It's gonna like looking those pictures of young Tausch that I used to see.
Young Tausch is I don't know if I think that those days are gone, but I could get to like medium age Tausch. The young Tausch is it'll be more like a young Trouse.
Young Trouse. Shout out to Money Mike. Okay, final one. My final one would be: what was your first car you drove?
73 Chevy pickup.
Can you drive stick shift?
Yes.
Do you feel like that's a lost art among the millennials that they cannot drive stick?
For sure. I think it's gone. I don't think anybody's even doing it. Do you think in the year 2023 there will be all unmanned vehicles?
I don't know if they'll be unmanned, but we'll definitely have a legit autopilot like they have now on Teslas.
So you'd feel comfortable in a few years just loading up, punching your coordinates in, and just sitting back and relaxing?
I would feel good doing that right now. I want a Tesla right now because I hear the autopilot's awesome.
But everybody else isn't on autopilot. I mean, don't you have to have everybody doing it? You can't have like 30% of the population doing it and then the other 70 not? Or am I crazy?
I mean, in a perfect world, yes, but that's not going to happen until maybe the year 2029, I guess. I don't know. No, because the autopilot can read all of that. I know there was one Tesla, the guy died and all this because the truck pulled out in front of him and the sensors didn't pick him up. But the most dangerous thing ever is driving with other people around you, especially now that everybody's texting and watching porn on their phones while they're driving on the highway.
With watching porn on their phones.
Well, there's a story of some guy died in a car wreck, and the poor bastard had porn playing on his phone with his pants down when they found him dead.
Ouch! That's a tough way to go out.
Matter
of fact, I got a car that has the adaptive cruise control. So if you're coming up too quick on like a semi, it will slam your brakes on, which is probably the closest thing I've had to the driverless car. But I think it's coming, and I think, man, I don't want to get into too many conspiracy theories as we're wrapping up here, but with everything going automated, I'm concerned about, are there going to be enough jobs in this country with everything going automated? I think there's going to be some big things happening here in the next 5 or 6 years.
Well, good. I'm going to have you back on here a couple months down the road, and we're going to talk about the progress that has been made, but also think of the people that are going to hack into these cars and wreck them into each other. That's the thing I'm worried about.
It seems like that's happening more and more, but I do think, man, it's great. The technology's great, but it seems like the world is changing, and there's a lot of great things, but man, there's some things that I think we're going to miss, and I think that's already happening. And you know what I did notice, and this is something that the reporters have talked a lot about, the backgammon and the stuff that I love playing backgammon and throwing cards, and everybody now, from what these guys have told me, is you get done with practice and it's immediately you go to the phone. And I think that's one of the things with the locker room and just in society in general. And again, if I sound like the old man on the lawn, so be it. I think that's one of the things that is lacking.
No, I mean, I'm guilty of I say things like that a lot as well, but you're right. You guys, especially the O linemen, that's like a tradition in Green Bay that you guys sit there with your shirts off. You guys are all so svelte and look amazing after practice, and you play backgammon and all these weird card games I've never even heard of.
Yeah, I was happy to see that at City's wedding. I definitely kept my shirt. Did you keep your shirt on at City's wedding?
Yes, I did, but not many other guys did.
You and I were one of the only few. I think Bakhtiari's brother. I think the three of us kept it on. No, but it was what you were saying, man. That's the stuff, and you're not out of it yet, but that's the stuff that I miss. Like not the shirtless stuff, the backgammon and the cribbage, and I mean that's the stuff, man. Now all of a sudden, if it's 12:30 and you're sitting in an office and you're saying, "Hey, let's go play a game of shirtless backgammon," you get looked at funny. So it's definitely, that camaraderie is, I think, one of the most fun parts about being on a team.
100%, man. That's why people do CrossFit and Soul Cycle and all this. They want to be a part of a group that's working towards a goal, I feel like.
Amen. That is completely true.
All right. That concludes our lightning round, Tausch.
Awesome.
Clap. Where can people find you? Where do you want to direct them?
Well, I think, we're on Wildy and Tausch is our Twitter handle for our show, and then obviously Mark Tauscher 65. But my Twitter game stinks, man. I don't put anything out there. I don't tweet. I use it now strictly to get news. This isn't a ringing endorsement to go check my Twitter. But the Wildy and Tausch Twitter handle, it's been a fun. We're 2 weeks into the show, and I get people ask me all the time, "Man, you're going to work 10 hours a week?" And they kind of give me a look like I'm crazy. It's so far so good. It's been fun.
Well, good for you, Tausch.
I think we're going to have you on before Ohio State plays Wisconsin.
Ooh, yeah, I'll do it. Let's do it.
I think, I think we're going to get you guys this year. So
okay, yeah. Well, let's not get carried away. Tausch, appreciate you, man. We'll check you out here. Obviously, great to see you. Great, your frisbee game, like I said, is legit. Hopefully, someone we know gets married here in the next 6 to 10 months near a beach, and we can duplicate that.
Awesome. It sounds great. Thanks, AJ.
All right, man. See ya.
You bet.
We're glad you could join us for today's conversation. After you subscribe to the show, head over to thehawkcast.com or reach out to AJ directly on Twitter at @officialAJHawk to recommend future guests that will help us inspire people to keep talking. Thanks again, and we look forward to speaking with you next time on the HawkCast.